As we continue to look at marriage, specifically how marriage is a picture of the gospel of Jesus Christ, how marriage is a picture of Christ's love for the church and the church's reverence and love for Christ, as we look at that, I want to show you how this has a very practical application to your marriage. As we've talked about previously, the problem in marriage is selfishness. That is the problem. And this is why I tell husbands and wives, and people, when I first say this, they don't like it, but don't try to make your spouse happy. Don't try. Don't live for your spouse to be happy. Because when you do that, what you are doing is you are feeding your spouse's selfishness. And selfishness, just like a monster, continues to grow. The flesh, if you sow to the flesh, you will reap corruption. And if you constantly give the things that your spouse is demanding, they will continue to demand more and more and more and more and more. And the reality is, you and I, husbands and wives, were not made to be satisfied by sex, by money, by possessions, by happy children, by a clean house, by playing golf, hunting more, whatever it is that is your marriage problem. Just realize this, that if you got your way, you would only be happy for a moment, but the flesh and the self would demand more. And this is something we have to realize about ourselves and realize about our spouse. We, my husbands, wives, were not created for sex. We were not created for money and financial security. We were not created for clean homes, bigger homes. We were not created for vacations. We were not created for children. We were created for God's glory. And the only way for us to experience true, lasting happiness and joy is through Jesus Christ. We were created for God, and He alone satisfies. So when we begin to try to give our spouse something other than God, something other than Christ, it is a losing battle. And when we demand from our spouse something other than God, it is a losing battle, because what we will do is we're feeding the flesh, and the flesh will grow like a monster. It's the toilet bowl effect. The more selfish you become, the more you demand. And the more you receive, the more selfish you become, and the more you demand. So what the gospel calls us to do is, Jesus says, if anyone will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross. At the beginning of marriage, in the beginning of a happy marriage, it begins with us saying, I will no longer live for self. I will only live for God's glory. I will not live for me and what I want in the here and now. I will live for God, what He desires, what brings Him glory. And so what this results in is I die to self, I become less selfish, I demand less, which makes me less selfish, which makes me demand less, which makes me less selfish, etc., etc. And so as a spouse, as a husband specifically, my goal now is not to make me happy. My goal is not even to make my wife happy. My goal is to bring glory to God, and whatever that means, if that means that I suffer in a horrid marriage the rest of my life, if that is for God's glory, I will suffer with a smile. If that means that I have to suffer in a sexless marriage, if I have to suffer in a penniless marriage, if I have to suffer in a marriage with no home, no car, whatever it may be, that I will do that, and I will give of myself, because it is not about what I can receive from the other person. It's about how I can glorify God by giving to my spouse. Many people talk about marriage being 50-50. You have the give and the take and the give and the take, and that's entirely wrong. Marriage is giving 100% of yourself, expecting nothing in return, just like the gospel, where God gives everything. Okay? And He gives it not because of what we can give Him back, but He gives it to show how glorious He is. So when we talk about marriage, what you and I must do is we must focus on giving God glory by dying to self and giving up of ourselves entirely for God's glory and for the eternal good of our spouse. Now, this does not mean that we try to make our spouse miserable, but this is the true means for happiness for you and for your spouse. We are created to glorify God and enjoy Him. The more your spouse becomes like Christ, and the more they receive of God and his glory, and the more they live for his glory, the happier they will become, and the happier your marriage will become. So when it comes to marriage, what it is you enter it with, I'm going to give 100% of myself. I'm going to give up everything for my spouse and God's glory. And what this does is it brings you out of the toilet bowl of selfishness. It brings you out of it. And as you continue to come out of it, what happens is you will find a greater joy and a greater peace in your marriage, but also you will begin to find that the earthly happiness and the getting along and all that comes because you are no longer concerned with getting your way. You are concerned with what God desires, what brings him happiness and him glory. Now, to illustrate this, my parents joked, there's a joke in my family about how the one time my parents had a fight or an argument. And what happened was at the end of the meal, my brother wanted another peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and so my mom started to get up to go get it. And my dad said, no, you can sit down, I'll go get it. She's like, no, you sit down. I'll go make the sandwich. He's like, no, honey, sit down. I'll make the sandwich. Well, I'm already up. I'll make the sandwich. And so they went back and forth, never raised their voices or anything, until my brother said, would y'all quit fighting? And now you and I know that's not a fight. That's not even an argument. That's love. That is, I am not concerned with me. I'm not concerned with happiness for self. I'm not concerned with getting to sit down and rest for a few more moments. I am going to try to outgive my spouse for the glory of God. I am going to try to give more of my time, more of my money, more of my energy, more of myself for my spouse so that God might be glorified. I tell young couples when they're getting ready to get married, this is the key to happiness in marriage, is you don't live for yourself. I tell young men, hey, if you get married and you want to have sex and your wife wants to sleep, you roll over and go to sleep because it's not about you. Okay? It's not about your needs. It's about caring for and loving your wife and giving up your needs, your rights, your wants, your demands, your wishes for God's glory. And the same thing is true if your spouse wants to have sex and you want to sleep. Well, you give up your sleep because it's not about you. And the same thing goes when it comes to the last piece of cake, when it comes to where the $20 is going to go. All the things that couples fight about. No, it's not about you. It's not about you. It's about God and his glory. So if you want to take and apply the gospel and the picture to marriage, it's a dying to self. It's not living for temporal happiness. It's realizing that happiness is only found as you live for God's glory and the good of your spouse.